Right. So Unit 17 is about practice activities and tasks for language and skills development. Now we talk about different activities before. We will go in detail of that what is it? What are practice activities and tasks for language and skills development? These are activities and tasks designed to give learners opportunities to practice and extend their use of language. Once we teach some language to them, we give some activities further in order to practice it and understand it better, such as new vocabulary we teach, functional exponents or grammatical structure we teach, or sub skills of reading, listening, speaking, or writing we teach. There are many different kinds of activities and tasks with different names and different uses. Here they have given you, if you see key concept, activity number 1, activity number 2, activity number 3. These are 3 different kinds of activities. So if you see here, first activity is complete the sentence about yourself with can or cannot. So if you see this activity, you have to put only can or cannot in it. Second activity, write an email to language school asking them about their courses. Find out when the courses are, time, what the courses are about, this course is dealing to what, then how much they cost, what's the fee for that, how long the course is are, and how much time it takes to finish it. Third activity, write an email to a friend asking them to come on holiday with you this summer. Now, if you see, all these 3 types of activities are 3 different ways of using the language. If we see down, we can see that these activities give learners an opportunity to use language, but in different ways. They are using language, but in different ways. Activity number 1 is control or restricted practice activity. For example, the learner can only use certain items of language, like they have to use only can or cannot. So it is control or restricted practice activity. We also call it control condition or restricted conditions. Give students practice in using language accurately. Is an exercise, it focuses on the form of language. So mostly when we teach and give exercise to use and practice the form of language, we do activity number 1, which is called control practice activity. Number 2 is less control or freer practice activity. Here what happens, an activity in which learners have some choice over what language they use. They have a little bit choice better than the first activity. Give student practice in using language accurately and communicating. Is a task, an activity with real world outcome. Likewise, activity 3 is a free activity. Give students practice in communicating. Is a task. So if you see, activity 3 is very much open options. Activity 2 is less open, some choice they have, some they are restricted, and in activity 1 they are fully restricted to use particular form of language. Speaking and writing activities can be categorized according to how much they control students' use of language. Freer, control, and free. Now on the next page we are going to discuss that a bit, comparing these activities, how they are similar and how they are different, what are their advantages, what are their disadvantages. Each category of activity has different focus and purpose and uses different activity types. Control activities give students repeated practice in accuracy and form of language. That's, you have to write it down, and allow them make few mistakes. So it is a safe learning environment, which we talked before. They are mostly used to guide students in using the form of target language. Some example of control activities are copying words and sentences, jazz chants, drills, guided repetitions. Okay. In drill, students can either repeat some model language as a class. As a class, when they do it, it is called choral drills. As individual, when they do one student alone, it is called individual drills. Replace a keyword is given in sentence, which is called substitutional drill, or use new words to create sentences with different structure, transformation drills. So different types of drill activities are mentioned here. You need to make the notes of it and try to understand. We do these activities different ways with the students. After that comes free activity, which was number 3. Here they have changed the series. First they have put the first one, control. Second is the last, which we discussed on the previous page. Free activities by contrast. By contrast mean opposite to what we discussed in the above. Allow students to use whatever language they wish in order to complete the task. Whatever way they want to use the language, they need to complete the task. Choice is there of using the language. In free activities, the teacher may not be able to predict what language the student will use. Why? Because you have given them an open option. So they have the choice to use whatever way they want to use language. So can't use these activities to give practice in specific language. So the free activities, we don't give them to practice specific language. This activity focus on fluency. As we discussed before, free activities are given to practice fluency, giving students practice in recalling and joining together the language they know and giving them opportunities to try to interact and communicate. Discussion, problem solving activities, okay, problem solving activities, sharing and comparing ideas, information and experiences. Rank ordering, prioritizing mean putting a list of things in order of importance. Writing emails, stories, letters, invitations, composition, and all example of free activities. These example, with each activity you have to make notes of it. Okay. After that comes between control and free activity are freer, the middle one, which we discussed on the previous page, in which the teacher can predict to some extent what language the student will need to use. For example, you can see that in activity 2 above, the students will need to use question forms. So the activity provides practice of question forms, but the students will also use other language which is not so predictable. Complete the email. This example is given on the previous page of writing an email to find about the course which they have to follow. These activities provide repeated practice of target language, like you target language, what they can follow there, what they can learn, what they cannot do, what are the requirement of that, guiding student to use its form correctly and integrate new language with language students already know. Example of freer activities are, now what are the example, what kind of activity are in the freer? Role plays, information gap activities, sentence completion gap fills, surveys. So these are the example of that. We can see that control activities give students lots of guidance and support in using language accurately. Freer give a little less guidance and support, and free activities do not give students guidance and support in the language they use. This is the definition of all these three. They summarize it here. Next paragraph. It is not always possible to categorize activities as control, freer, and free, as it depends on how the teacher uses them. Now, always you cannot categorize them because it depends how you are using it. Okay, so depend on the situation. Let's take role play. Now we will talk about the role play, which is we use in the freer activity. For example, a teacher could put students in pairs and ask them to reproduce a dialogue they have just heard on a recording. They listen to a recording and they listen some dialogues there. So they have to reuse those ones. This would be control activity. At the end of the lesson, why it will be a control activity, although it is freer, because you are restricting them to use a particular item, particular language component. At the end of lesson, on asking for a giving personal information, students could do a role play in which they meet a new person at a party and have to find out about them. As the student would be very likely to use language they had just learned, this would be a freer activity. Imagine now a reading text which discuss the advantages and disadvantages of social networking websites. After the students have done language and comprehension work on the text, the teacher asks one group of students to list ideas in favor of social networking sites and the other group lists all the arguments against. Now you are making one activity different ways. That's what they are talking to you, that it depends what type of task you are giving to somebody. So it is not always that you can put it in one category. One category you can use it as a freer activity. A freer activity you can bring it back to the control activity. Okay, depends on the task the teacher asks the students to do. The teacher asks one group of students to list ideas in favor of the social networking and other group list an argument against it. The teacher then pairs students from the different groups and asks them to argue in their roles about advantages and disadvantages. Now in the end, you put them together, one is for, one is against. So now you put them to argue with each other, for and against, with the argument. This would be an example of free role play, and we don't know what language the students. So now the same activity which you do in the freer, you change into the, when you put into the discussion between them, you change into the free activity. Before you restricted them, okay, one group you find points against, other group you find points in advantages of it, and then you do another activity, the same thing you put together and you say, okay, now you discuss with each other giving you a point, so then it becomes a free activity. That is how you change the nature of the activity, by giving them different kind of tasks to do that. Okay, is that clear, Matish?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so it depends how you use the activity in which way. Okay, the task of each activity is changing the nature of it. There are also many activities and tasks that are commonly used to develop reading and listening skills. These can't be divided into controlled, freer and free, as they practice receptive and productive skills. Now if you are going to practice reading and listening skills, so receptive and productive skills they are going to practice, so you can't put that into the control of freer and free practice that way. Here are 6 activities. What reading or listening sub skills do they focus on? What's the name of the type of activity? They have given it here, and the other side they have given the option. You can go through these tables and try to understand the activity types and what kind of skills they are talking about it. So it will take a time when you understand those activities and then you are applying on this table. Okay, so I leave it for you to prepare it yourself and make your notes, and then practically go through these and see how they have divided that and what type of activity is for what kind of sub skills and what are they doing in it. Next one is, it continues to the next page the same way.
Excuse me, sir. Is it
Yes.
okay if I leave the class, and would you mind sending the recording to
Yeah,
me?
I am already recording it, so I will send me your email address, okay?
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Okay.
We can see that these activities can differ in several ways. The skills and sub-skills they focus on their design and what interaction pattern like how you do it individually, you are doing the pair group, okay? So the kinds of the skills they focus on and the interaction pattern they use are not fixed. So for example, multiple choice question could be used for reading, listening and grammar activities and can be done individually. Multiple choice when you don't do that in the group. In pairs or in groups are mingling activity where you put the students, okay, you talk to one, get the information from this one, that one. Similarly, form filling could be used by reading, listening, grammar practice and done individually in pairs or in groups. So some activities you do individually, some you put that in the pairs, some that put in the group, like divide that one group, another group, okay? So that is how it differs from each other, depends on the topic you are teaching. Activity 3 and 5 provide example, which is given here on the back one, and the example also is there, of another way of categorizing activities. Both of these activities involve an information gap. For example, students need to talk to one another to exchange information they don't know in order to complete the activity. Some information one student has, some another student has, then they exchange their information and then there is an activity based on that they have to do. This means they are talking in order to communicate, not just to practice language or they have got to answer right. Now, one in particular information is with one student, another one. So they communicate with each other. They discuss and then they provide the information which is needed. Some information will be with one student, some information will be with another student. Free role plays and surveys are the example of information gap activities. So free role plays and surveys are these examples. There is no information gap in exercise or drills. Okay. So now we will go to the key concept. When come to the classroom, then what you do? When selecting activities for practicing and developing language, it is up to the teacher to decide whether to do a control practice, freer practice, or free activity, or an activity that focuses on accuracy or communication. The choice will depend on students' needs and preferences. So you have to decide as a teacher whether you want to give the freer, or control practice activity. Okay, and depends what the students want to learn from that lesson and which one will be the suitable activity for them. So that decision comes to the teacher to decide on it. When choosing activity and task for developing skills, the teacher can decide which skills or sub-skills to focus on. Again, students' needs and preferences should help us to make the choices. Using several kinds of activities in our lesson adds variety. Now, when we do different activities in a lesson, it gives variety in our teaching that particular lesson. This helps to keep lesson more interesting and motivating, and it is become interesting when you do different activities and the students are motivated because they learn the same topic in different ways. Okay, so likewise you can make your lesson interesting and motivating by using different activities. Activities in lessons are usually linked so that first and one leads into helps the next. There are several different ways linking activities in lesson. There are just some of them. Now, when you want to link one activity with another in order to teach one particular lesson, but three different types of activities. Now, how to link it together in order to give a nice presentation in the class, the students take it easy, stepwise. Language focus lesson. Now, if your target is to focus on the language, what will happen? First, you do the presentation, and in the presentation, you do control practice activities, freer practice activities. These two comes in the presentation. Lead in, you can do what? Tasks you can give, then after that come to presentation, and then further tasks you give. So this example is given in the previous, where we did the lesson TBL and PPP. You can see that stepwise, this both you have to study together. When you understand the PPP and TBL method which we adopted there, how the lesson was introduced, then you, after understanding that, keeping in mind, when you do these activities and you see on the previous page the way they have given you the activities, how to do it, then you will understand it. Okay, so all these 2-3 lessons, 15, 16, 17, they are linked together. Okay, so you have to study these 3 lessons in combination with each other. Skills-based lesson. Skills-based lesson, reading, writing skills when you want to improve, or listening one or speaking one. Warmer or lead in. You need to do warmer and lead in activity. Comprehension activities and task, post-task activities. Now you do warmer and lead in kind of activity either. After that you do comprehension tasks, the things which you want to make them understand, and then post-task, when the task is finished, then you do activity in order to consolidate that, reinforce whether they have understood it properly. Comprehension activities for listening and reading often start by focusing on more general levels of comprehension, then move on to sub-skills involving detail or specific attention to the text. Now, in the comprehension activities of the listening and reading when you do, so generally first you make them understand, and then sub-skill is like, what are the sub-skill in that? You are doing it for scanning, or you are doing it for, overall reading of that, okay? Skimming you are doing there, or reading for details, or listening for details. It depends further what's the activity in it you are doing. Then to focus on the language used in the text, and the language also, form of the language also you discuss, which is used over there. Right. Example 1, a listening skill lesson. For example, you are doing a listening lesson. Lead in, discussing the topic of the listening and learning any important new vocabulary. Lead in is always an activity which is dealing with that particular topic. Okay. Comprehension task. Then the main task, what they need to understand there. Listening to the recorded conversation and answering multiple choice question about it. Now what happened in the comprehension? Definitely they have to listen something, and based on the listening they have to do some activities given to them, okay, and they will answer the question. So then listening to conversation again and completing a form with specific information. Then about that listening there will be some information given, and there will be gaps in it. They will ask the question about it. They have to complete that, what they heard in the dialogue. Now when you complete it, post task activity, brief discussion of the topic of the conversation. Now what happened in the conversation, what they heard in the listening, then post task, when it is completed, you discuss that, what they heard, what they missed in that, what was they're talking about, how many people were there, who were against it, who was in favor of it. All these things you do post task activity. Example 2, a topic-based skills lesson. What happened in it? Lead in, speaking about the topic, doing related language work. Okay. Task, listening to recording about the topic, then reading a text about the topic. Post task activity, discussing the topic or focusing on the language of the topic, writing a composition about it. Now, post task activity, whatever they heard in the dialogue and all that, you write a composition about it, what you heard there. So you can give a post-task activity in that way also. This is an integrated lesson. For example, a lesson that involves working on variety of skills with each leading into the text. Now, this is what it was all about, but you cannot understand these unit 17 if you have not understood unit 16. You cannot understand unit 16 if you have not understood unit 15. So 15, 16 and 17 are linked together. Once you understand in detail these three topics, these three lessons need your more attention compared to the other units which we have done. Okay, so in detail you gave by linking together these three, then you will be able to do these activities, which is the worksheet I'm going to give. So there is one worksheet which is unit 17 and 15 has a one worksheet, and unit 16 has a separate worksheet. I will send you two worksheets covering these three lessons. Okay, so these three lessons are very important. Why? Because you cannot learn individually each lesson. You can only learn once you have the knowledge of all three topics. So together study it, make your notes, and it's the lengthy area of the TKT module 1. All right, and there are a lot of theoretical things in it. There are a lot of activities and tasks in it. You will be tested in this. They will tell you that the teacher is doing this kind of task or this activity is going on. What kind of activity it is? So if you see in all this, whatever is mentioned, the activities, you need to make the list of those activities, and then you need to put these activities are used for what kind of topic when you are teaching, how you relate it to that. Then the category of it, is it control practice activity, or is it freer activity, or is it free activity? Then what type of tasks are done or activities are done for the free, for the control practice activity, for the freer activity, and the free activities. All this you have to make your notes. It's not an easy topic which we discuss all these three. It is want your attention more compared to the rest of the topic which we discussed. Okay, is that clear, Matish?
Yes, sir.
All right, so that's it for these topics. We completed here unit 15, 16, 17. These three topics you have to prepare together. Okay, likewise, like if you see we go to unit 18, it's a totally different topic. It has nothing related with the other topics. Separately it is, but these three topics are difficult. Why? Because you cannot understand them individually. It is related with each other. So first of all, 15, go through that, the methods and approaches, how they are done, what kind of activities are done in that. So try to understand that activity, go through the glossary and understand it. Then come to the next one, presentation one, and the introductory activity. So understand how the presentation is done in the TBL method and the PPP method, and what are the steps they are following, and each steps dealing with which area, and what type of activities are done in that area. When those things are clear to you, then you come towards the 17, and when they are discussing these activities, you will have an understanding of it. Okay? All right. So is there any question you want to ask before I close the session?
No, sir.
Sanduni? Chandani, are you there?